Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. I want to thank my sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So here's an episode for your listening enjoyment.
Willie Mays passed away this week, and it brings up who is now the greatest living ball player.
In the spirit of the question, isn't it Koufax? Because you look at people that are close to, I hate to say death, but he's late 80s, if not 90. The Death Watch Hall of Fame question. He is an amazing Hall of Famer that, other than not having the longevity, was probably the best pitcher in baseball for almost 10 years.
It's a fun topic, but it's really subjective. I got to agree with Rich on Ricky Henderson. Of course, my bias wants to say Ken Griffey Jr., Barry Bonds, the guys I grew up with. But at the end of the day, you're going to have so many different answers.
I think it's Barry Bonds at this point. I know he's not the nicest guy in the world, and we got the HGH stuff. But his numbers, even before he started using allegedly, were Hall of Fame. He has video game type baseball numbers. I would love to just say Ken Griffey Jr. and Spike Bonds, because I'm not a fan of Bonds, in the same vein as I am of the kid. So Bonds would be probably my pick. Henderson, Griffey Jr. are in that mix.
Can I ask the question a different way? Michael Jordan was asked, was he the greatest player of all time? And his response was basically, figure out which player had the most impact on the game. So which of these players had the biggest impact on the game?
Let's say I ask Barry Bonds right now, are you the greatest living player in baseball? You know what Barry would say? No, he'd say, I'm the greatest living or dead player of all time.
He did say he would hit a home run off central pitch.
If you take his statistics without any asterisk, he can make a case for it.
By the way, Barry Bonds trivia, he has actually become a very dedicated cyclist. And you can actually trace how many miles he bikes every day. He posts that as Barry L. Bonds. He's actually quite the cyclist now. He does 20 miles on every time he does a bike. He is in probably better shape now than he was during his baseball career, which is pretty impressive.
He looks fantastic. The remaining living players, the one with the biggest impact, are we saying Barry Bonds?
It's Barry Bonds if you count negative and positive impact.
Yeah. One of the debates that always comes up with pitchers for Most Valuable Player award is people sometimes think it's only the day they pitch that matters. That's not true. It's actually the day before and the day after they pitch. Because if you have somebody like a Bob Gibson in 1968 who's going to throw at least 7 innings, you can use your bullpen a little deeper in the game before he pitches and the day after he pitches, knowing he's going to go deep in the game. So he really has a 3-day impact. So he really had an impact on 120 games in a season.
I'm still voting for Koufax. When I was researching for my Willie Mays tribute episode, the sabermetricians want to take away Sandy Koufax's MVP in 63 and give it to Mays because of advanced metrics. And just figuratively, they just say Mays was more deserving.
Yeah, there was an ESPN article where David Schoenfeld said Mays would have gotten 8 MVPs if they used today's metrics for it.
And Koufax was one of the victims of that post hoc reasoning.
In actuality, Barry Bonds probably should have more MVPs too.
If you use today's metrics, you'd have different Hall of Famers.
And I think that's true in every sport. Our opinions of people change. We look at things based on what we saw when we were kids.
Yep.
The metrics are better today. The analytics in all the sports are better today. What was good 30 years ago is not what we do today. It's just things do evolve.
When you factor in the hobby, Griffey Jr.'s impact is tremendous as well. 89 Upper Deck brought people into the hobby that weren't baseball card collectors. They became them chasing that card.
Griffey is more popular than Bonds today because we grew up watching Griffey and Bonds, and we have more of an attachment to Griffey. 20, 30 years from now, when people start looking more at numbers than the people our age who grew up with them, will more people be collecting Bonds or more people be collecting Griffey or A-Rod?
Griffey is still going to be more hobby prevalent even years later.
The fact that he has perhaps the seminal card of the 1980s in the hobby for that number 1 Griffey, which is a great photo and leads off a set that changed the hobby.
He had the shoes, the video games, that went backwards. He crossed into the social.
It was the era of ESPN, right? A daily highlight reel of his fantastic play in center field.
Yeah, he's a more likable guy. He doesn't do a lot of trash talking, pretty humble.
But the subtext of the question is, does A-Rod move up? When people forget, they just see him as an announcer with gaudy statistics. Because then you think, hey, Rod is cheap now compared to what he might be. The other thing I was going to say about Koufax, I'm not stopping at Koufax. Koufax is the only one we mentioned where people would want to consciously accumulate his autographs right now, because that's another side of our hobby.
When someone passes away, like Mays cards bump up. And I get it, but I don't get it. I understand on the autograph stuff because he's no longer around to sign anymore. But even regular stuff goes up. He didn't hit another home run or make a great catch in the outfield. You should be getting Mays cards because he already had a great Hall of Fame career. The fact that he passes away doesn't change that, other than the fact that he's unfortunately no longer with us.
Willie Mays is more popular this week than he was 2 weeks ago.
Maybe you don't have a Willie Mays card. You're like, you know what? I should have had one. I don't. I'm going to get one now. So I understand the dynamic of that. We want a connection to a great player, especially if we're a fan of that sport.
I'm just thinking, if you have $100 Willie Mays card from the late 50s, early 60s, let's say it's a 5 condition, something like that, $100 card. If you marked it up to 150, I'm not sure you sold it. If you left it at 100 where it was 2 weeks ago, I'm guessing it sold. That was my experience. Now, if you mark it up to 150 on Friday, I don't know, you mark it back to 100 on Sunday and sell it. But there's an open window to sell his cards at reasonable prices. But if you gouge, so is that what's going on?
I think by the end of the weekend, most of the Mays inventory from the dealers will be picked through. And so then they might have a chance to raise the price on what's left. But everybody has it out right now, so it's competitive. So you're right. They're selling for more of the comps, but you can get maybe 5-10% over comps. There is a little bump there.
How about the morality of that?
I was at the show when Bill Russell passed away in the middle of the show. It turned my stomach to watch some dealers literally cross out prices as the news went through the room. So the question is, where is that line? Mays doesn't bother me quite as much because people are interested in buying it, but watching people cross it out as the news came out turned me off a little.
It's not a one table show. If you go to McDonald's and they just say, oh, by the way, there's a potato shortage, so French fries now are $6 instead of $3. But then you notice that Burger King has French fries for $3 still. And you think, I'm going to go to Burger King. Okay. So if you double the price of the Bill Russell or the Willie Mays or whatever, and you scratch out the price so you can see the previous price, then you can shop elsewhere. And if everybody's done it, you may come back to McDonald's. But it's a free world. The ethics are important, but the competitive pressure of being in a multi-table show, if everybody has doubled their Bill Russell cards, then that's the morality of that day in that environment. I think it's wrong. 10% is polite, is inflation. 100% doubling is gouging to me.
To your point, it leaves an opening for another dealer to raise it 10% and
Get all the business.
Yep, exactly.
I'm only going to increase by 50%. Come on.
It's sad, but to your point, that's the morality in the room. You don't have to buy it. You can wait.
There can be a race up and there can be a race down. They're there to sell.
30 days out from the National, I'm not going to lie, slow my buying down and just sock that money away I would normally spend, so I bring it to the National with me. I can't be the only one that thinks along those lines. I got to pay for a flight, a hotel room. I'm going to skip this show and do my National prep for attending that and buying some cards. I think shows probably feel that presence of the oncoming National.
You use that as leverage? You walk up to a table at a show this weekend and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this, but really I'm saving money for the National. But if you'll make me a deal here, I'll maybe buy it now. But I know I can find it at the National for my price.
I'm probably not at the show as a consumer. So as a dealer, I will be there trying to make some money and put that towards my trip and my attendance at the Nationals.
I have found some really great deals because we're getting close to the National. Last year, I ended up buying a collection that was phenomenal 3 weeks before the National. At the time, I was like hesitant. Should I do this? And I ended up pulling the trigger and didn't regret it.
So I have my own moratorium where I stop buying, but I'll buy deals online on forums and marketplaces because people are, I don't want to say blowout, but giving great deals because they're trying to generate money for their national.
Mm-hmm.
So I break my own rules sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to spend this, but I almost can't say no to that. It's a no-brainer. You play tug of war in your mind.
If somebody walked up to the table this morning and used that exact line and said, I have some cards to sell, but if I don't sell them, it's okay. I'll take them to the National. They played that angle, absolutely.
So overwhelm me with your offer.
Well, that was the cut of it, yeah.
So if you're a dealer who's set up at the National, but you're doing the show before the National, I'm sure that affects their pricing. Hey, I'm not going to give this away. I'll just take it with me 30 days from now and put it in my showcase in Cleveland and bump it up. People expect a little bit of a sticker increase at the Super Bowl, the hobby. That's a dynamic too on the dealer side.
I'd rather sell something this month for $100 than sell the same card a year from now for $110. However, I'd rather sell it for $110 if it's at the National next month instead of next year. When you're selling a card, cash presented, I'm ready to buy it at this price. And if you think it's slightly more in the future, I believe you should take it.
Selling today for 100 might make you 150 at the National based on what you bought for the 100 you took in. And then you just reimburse that money into the hobby. Or, as Jim said, 100 now is better than 150 a year from now. It's maybe not good as well.
I didn't say that.
Oh.
I'll take the 150 in a year. But not 110.
But not 110. Okay, fair enough. What's the famous thing? Bird in the hand, two in the bush?
1.1 in the bush.
One in the bush.
1.1. I think I could speak for Rich, too, because when we go to the dollar boxes, it's the same strategy. Yeah, actually, he and I have a very different strategy, but we stick to our guns. I think if Rich showed me what he got at the Dallas show and then what he got at the National 3 weeks later and vice versa, but there wouldn't be any raised eyebrows. But yep, that's the kind of stuff that you're picking out. This is the kind of stuff I'm picking out. So absolutely stick to our guns.
And I do switch things occasionally, but not very often. And I'm more liberal when I'm looking at dime cards. Oh, this dime card looks interesting. When it gets to the dollar box, I stick with it because you buy 100 dime cards, that's $100. You buy 100 dime cards, that's $10. If I screw up on 50% of the dime cards, it's no big deal. If I screw up on 50% of the dollar cards, that's a Ulysses S. Grant bill.
Rich does not mess up that much. Come on, guys. That was rhetorical. Rich, occasionally, just like me, we occasionally get something that's not good. But the most part, our strategy is to make good choices.
And that comes with experience.
And I think sticking to the strategy too, Rich. You adapt a little bit, but you have a very high batting average, and I do too.
What are your expectations for what the Nationals under new leadership? Factor that in there as well.
The week after this Cleveland National, I think there'll be a positive buzz about the show, about the traffic, the dollars, all that stuff. But because we haven't been to Cleveland for a while, the complaint will be the logistical, getting around, getting from the show to the hotel, to the restaurant. If there's 25,000 people at the show each day, let's say 20,000, there are going to be 20,000 rent-a-cars. There's going to be some shuttles, and the logistical problems of people moving are going to be a challenge. We talk about the different trade nights. If they're at different hotels, as opposed to the one at the show, I think there are going to be people making decisions based on proximity. It's the opposite of Chicago. It'll make people excited about going to Chicago for the next 3 years.
Do you think that will affect attendance, Dr. Jim?
No, it'll affect griping.
But that's what we do as a hobby. That's our sign.
No, we don't. No one complains in the hobby.
Okay, the last National in Cleveland was 2018, and it was 4 years in between Cleveland Nationals. And this was pre-COVID hobby boom, and the National was a banger, as the expression goes, in 2018. 6 years. It's still close enough to the megalopolis. It's an easy flight to get in and out of the Cleveland airport. If you're in New York, you can easily do the trip. It's a 1 hour flight. It's fairly easy to get there. Or you drive. It's not that far. So you're both well within driving range of the National.
Cleveland is a fabulous collecting city. It's a fabulous city in many respects. The restaurants, it's just a problem getting there. You can get to the airport easy. If you guys are driving, then your problem is going to be everybody's going to want to ride with you. And after you get there, it's going to be Danny and John's
I just
shuttle
installed
service.
a meter. It's funny you mentioned
Installed a meter. Okay.
I just installed a meter in my vehicle. So
That's something Barry Bonds would do.
John, since he does part-time driving as an Uber driver,
Okay.
Uber people on his way to Cleveland so he can pay. He'll pick up people. Oh, you're on my way to Cleveland? That pays for part of the trip. It is brilliant.
The